Good evening, Chef Amelia. This is Peter Rios, your Chef National Secretary on the Board of Directors. Welcome to the next series in our Career Readiness webinar, where we'll be focusing on the different types of interviews and how to best prepare for those interviews. We have a great group of panelists with us this evening. First with us, we have Juan Ramos from Cisco. Juan, if you can give us a virtual wave, thank you for joining us. Juan has worked at Cisco since graduating from Rochester Institute of Technology. He manages both graduate and military veteran hires in the Customer Experience Academy program. He also represents the Latinx community as the co-lead for the RTP chapter of Conexión. We also have with us Carrie Hunter from Texas Instruments. Carrie served in several roles. She currently leads the diversity and university recruiting programs for the organization. In this role, she forms partnerships and builds methodologies for identifying and hiring a diverse group of talent. And she enjoys helping students market themselves to obtain valuable real-world experience and land their dream job. So thanks for joining us, Carrie. And then we have with us also Elenia Herrera Lutz from Accenture. Thanks for joining us, Elenia. She's enjoyed a diverse career in the private sector, in the consulting and human resources fields, working with some of the country's most recognizable companies and diversity professional organizations. As Accenture's campus I&D recruiting lead, Elenia develops the strategic direction and manages the execution of entry-level diversity recruiting efforts, and has been with Accenture for 13 years and is very involved with the Hispanic American Employee Resource Group and graduated from Purdue University. Thanks for joining us, Elenia. So I'm also going to bring Carrie back in, and Carrie's to lead us in our first question. And I want to really encourage all of our Facebook viewers out there to chime in with any questions along the way, and we'll do our best to display the questions and get those answered for you. So Carrie, for our first topic, I think we're going to focus on behavioral and group interviews this evening. So maybe you can start us off with maybe how to best prepare for a behavioral interview, and what types of questions should you expect?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so understanding what it is, first and foremost, is important. It's not about the questions that you ask or that are asked or how you, it's about how they ask it. So it's based on the premise that, past performance is the best predictor of future performance. And so it's all about asking a question in a way where you can present an example of how you've handled a situation in the past or what your experience was. So the most important way to prepare is to really study your resume and think back about those experiences. Come up with what your accomplishments were. Come up with what your challenges were. So that when you get asked these questions, you have examples. You don't have to think and go, oh my gosh, I don't remember what I did 4 years ago. Really want to think back to what you experienced and where your accomplishments and some of the challenges were. So the questions might be, you can ask a technical question in a behavioral way. So it could be a technical question where they want to really hear your kind of process for going through it and how you did it. Or it might be, talking more about a time when maybe you were trying to lead a team and your team members weren't kind of pulling their weight, and how did you handle that, and how did that turn out? The behavioral interview, really has kind of 3 parts to it. So when you respond, the first thing you got to remember is think about past, speak in past tense. I did do this, not I would do this. As interviewers, we know anybody can on the fly kind of come up with what you would do. It's easy to think of an answer that would sound good to the interviewer. And it's easier to understand when somebody's maybe making something up on the fly too. So you want to kind of come up with that real life example and speak in the past tense. And you want to really talk about what the situation was. And that should be pretty brief, explain
I think we may have lost Carrie.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
I can certainly pick up from her question. I would recommend for behavioral interviews, most behavioral interviews tend to be a situation that was a challenge. It could be a teamwork situation, a learning curve situation, time management, or dealing with others. So you should organize, like Carrie was suggesting, in identifying examples in which you had a key contributing factor in that situation. So plan for having a 2-minute overview of what that scenario was. And then after that, you can start going into the details of what the challenges were and how you effectively handle each of those challenges. Be very attentive to the interviewer because you will get cues about what they're valuing, what they want to, kind of steer the conversation, so you can provide those details. And at the end, you should provide a conclusion to how you effectively solve that scenario.
Yeah, so think of it in terms of, they have different ways of naming them. So it's like problem, stating the problem, the action that you took, and then the result, right? So
the CART method, right?
Yeah, so I think for me, when I'm interviewing candidates, it's good that I guess in terms of study prep and preparation for those types of questions, you want to have a good stack of maybe 5 or 6 different stories where you can explain it as a story and almost conversationally. Somebody woke me up in the middle of the night and I was asleep, and then I helped them through this problem while I was still asleep, and they thanked me in the morning, right? And these are it tells you about how that kind of highlight who you are as a person and your best talents and your strengths.
Another key tip that I would like to add is balancing the use of we and I. I know Carrie mentioned using the past in terms of what you accomplish, but obviously, as fantastic as your senior design project team was, we're not interviewing at once the entire senior design team is you. So make sure that, I think it's okay to give credit to a teammate that maybe alerted the team to a major issue. But then if you took it on and you took practice steps, then you should switch to I. So then people have a very clear picture of what were your contributions versus the team.
Yeah, and so if you did take lead, if you did take charge on a project or an initiative, highlight that. If you played a supporting role, highlight that. You don't want a situation where you're always talking about all the things you've done and all the people that you've led. Talk about and mix it up a little bit with stories about how you've supported, played a supporting role, and achieve the overall effect in the same manner for group projects.
And I have another tip.
Are both, that's a great. No, go ahead, Elena. Go ahead.
I wanted to add a last tip. 2 tips. In every type of interview, practice with a group of friends. I think forcing you to speak out what you're trying to say and getting feedback from your friends or other mentors that you respect is very helpful. And then I forgot the second one. I'll come back to that.
Yeah, for me, in these types of situations, for prepared answers that are typically the common set of behavioral questions that I'll be asked during an interview, I've even gone as far as to record my answer, like first type it out on my computer and then record it on my phone and then play it back so that I can perfect my story. Sometimes you may know or you may have a great story, but then you tell it poorly and it doesn't come out across the way you wanted it to come across. But that is some ways that I always practice when I'm telling a story or when I'm answering these types of questions as well.
Those are all great points, regarding practicing. I know sometimes a lot of companies offer mock interviews, or you can do that, with a colleague or through your career office. You can get great feedback there. Also, I agree with Elenia, balancing the we and the I, making sure that you highlight your individual contributions, but also those of your team. From your experience in conducting behavioral interviews, what are some things candidates have done that really help them stand out or that demonstrate that they shine during the interview?
I think really listening to what is being asked. And this came back to the point that I didn't remember a minute ago. Listen to what the interviewer is saying and the types of questions you're getting. If you're getting the sense you have already heard that question twice or three times, is not the interviewer, typically it's not the interviewer not paying attention to you. It's probably that you have not addressed something that they want to learn more about you. So if you have that feeling, wow, that person already, didn't he ask me or she asked me this? Take a pause and make sure that you're truly focusing on what is been asked. I know we all get nervous and it's, you could lose focus. And I think it's okay too if you lose your way to say, allow me a couple of seconds to jot down a couple of things. I want to make sure that I'm answering this correctly. I'll come back to you in 20 seconds. And I think I rather see a confident, composed student that is really trying hard to answer what the question is.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we have some people chiming in here. Thankful for the tips. I see we also have Axel Javier. He's a Boston professional, which kind of brings me to my next question. We also have professional members watching there that have years of experience. Maybe speak to what you expect from experienced hires. So maybe professionals with 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years of experience. Are there particular topics that you expect them to highlight, or kind of what is the difference in expectation from an entry hire and an experienced hire in a behavioral interview?
So for me, an entry-level hire, I kind of see them, what I'm looking for is the potential. Do they have the potential to learn and grasp the amount of work that we're going to train them on, and from there teach others? That's kind of, so my interview questions are structured around identifying what they do currently and where their strengths are. But for a professional, it's kind of a little different. So you've had a little bit of time to develop your own brand and to develop your own personal style. So I think for me, it's more along the lines of with your given experience, how confident are you in leading others or taking charge of certain things? Or one of the that's pretty popular nowadays is if you were, because I'm in a technical role, right? How would you explain the internet to a group of first graders? And that, it kind of throws a curveball in the sense of, for a technical interview, that you know what the internet is, you know what it does, you know how it works, but how would you then take that big old concept and then structure it down and tailor it down to an audience that may not be familiar? And that it really does bring out it really does, is a defining moment in some of my interviews. Some folks are very technical, but they can't make that translation. And there's a hard line between what they know and how they can convey that information to others to teach. And for others, they do very great. I mean, I've had certain past folks that were around that audience, so they had to do that as part of the job very often enough. And that was something that we really value here in my team and in my organization.
And then I would like to build on what Juan was sharing. I think as an experienced professional, you should really be able to articulate well the big picture and the ability to connect all the dots in terms of your industry knowledge, any expertise areas that you may have, whether it's supply chain, whether it's robotics, whatever it may those be, into the responsibilities of the role. I think as an experienced hire, you should also pay very particular attention to culture. I think caring about culture is important in any employment decision that you do, because you can have the perfect job description, but if you don't really like the company culture, you're not going to stay in that organization. But as you do get older, I do feel you have to invest more time individually in that job search. And if you're going to make a leap from an organization where you already have built a network of people to move on to another one, I think you really got to do your homework on the culture aspect.
and develop your brand. That's very important as well. Not only should you do your research on the place that you're looking for to seek employment to, but also to make sure that they know a little bit more about you, as in what work you've done before the interview. So not just what we see in your resume and in your application, but what might I find on LinkedIn or some other social media profile. If your resume and your resume stands out as something that shows you as a professional person, but then your Facebook and your Twitter and your other social media accounts show another side of you that doesn't match up and line up, that may actually send up a red flag to me as a recruiter, as an interviewer for that type of candidate. So make sure that who you are as a person, inside work, inside the office and outside the office, lines up with your values and what you believe in.
All great points. All great points. Thank you for that feedback. And I think, before we transition, I'm actually going to pop a question up here from Emily. And thinking about, there are usually, what I found in behavioral interviews, there's a lot of common themes, right? Can you talk about your leadership, your communication, how you deal with conflict? And I think at least a common pitfall or weakness that I see is individuals usually can't speak to those difficult questions. Tell me about a time that you failed. Tell me about a time you dealt with conflict. So it's really important to also those difficult situations and how you, I guess, found the positive or how to some type of measurable outcome from that. I want to, before we go into kind of common pitfalls that we've seen in the behavioral interviews, let's take this question from Emily. She asks, what is the best way to convey skills acquired in non-STEM prior employment?
I love this question.
So if you're going for a STEM job, go ahead, take us away, Lania.
I think first of all, obviously and in STEM, you have very specific areas of expertise, but as the business world continues to become more digitized and more team-oriented, those soft skills will continue to be important. I think one very critical way is, number one, your professional presence. How are you communicating yourself, your ideas, and your interactions with others? So I think in your examples, unless you're dealing with a situation that only involves machines, I think almost all the situations that we encounter or challenges in the workplace are with people. So highlight those people challenges, right? Motivation, energizing others, right? All of the ship presidents and vice president executives boards know the challenges about engagement. So I think those are as important as the technical skills. Nobody wants to hire someone that doesn't know how to work well with others. Juan, I'm sure you'll have another different take than me.
Yeah, for me, I've had the pleasure of interviewing candidates from various backgrounds. I've interviewed candidates that were stay-at-home moms, raised their children until they were able to go to school, and then wanted to enter the workforce in an entry-level position. I've interviewed folks that framed houses, so they swung a hammer for 10 hours a day. And then they went to night school and they got their certification and came in and applied for an entry-level role with us. We've recruited from students that were at that point in degree programs that were non-STEM, like nursing, in other like accounting, things like that. In terms of the skill set is what I really care about. So first, to Lydia's point, the culture fit is good for me, right? I need someone, so if you're coming from a non-STEM background, then the base tools are, how do you work with people? How do you solve problems? And how do you identify with someone who doesn't quite understand or isn't also, if you become a technical expert, how can you then work with customers that are also not technical experts once you get your skill set up to par? So for me, it's more about understanding the person who's more curious, who can do research, right? If you research about my company, if you research, that's a big plus for me, because it tells me that you just aren't applying for anything and basically looking to see what sticks. And then from there, identifying what you bring to the table in terms of, based off of your current studies and your prior work experience, what do you bring to the table? Just because of the fact that you may not come from a STEM background, doesn't mean that I won't have an appreciation for how you solve problems. It may be a little bit different than how I solve a problem, but that's actually great. We don't want a room full of folks who answer the same question with the same answer. We want different perspectives, and your experience you bring in your life and your past background and your prior employment only helps us learn more and become a stronger team.
Great. I think that answered Emily's question. So let's transition to maybe the last component of, or last bit of our discussion for behavioral interviews. Are there any kind of common mistakes that you see candidates make in behavioral interviews that maybe would benefit from practice, or maybe you can share a best practice to prevent a particular common mistake?
One common mistake that I see is that students stay at a high level and never get to the detail of what they did. I think it's great to mention, let's say your situational question is about teamwork, and how did you solve a situation where two people in your team didn't get along. I think it's great that you mentioned something about the importance of knowing how to work well with others. But me hearing you, or Juan hearing you say that you're a great leader and you are such an amiable person really doesn't help to the answer. Just don't tell me what you are. Instead of that, show me. So if you really value teamwork, then, describe the specific, almost like in bullet points, the actions that you took to help remedy that situation. Get to the specifics of what you exactly did. And I would say if you do not, I will also stay away from very highly personal situations that are hard to relate to the workplace. So again, if we go to that conflict situation, describing how you solve a fight between your roommate and their boyfriend or girlfriend, it's really hard to translate those skills into the workplace. So I would stay away from very personal references, and anything safe is about your school projects, your, I don't know, senior design, your internships, or volunteering.
And for me, I think the biggest one, the common mistake that I've seen is where the candidate is giving me an answer that they think I want to hear, right? This is a great answer. Let me give you an answer that I believe that you're gonna like versus the answer that's coming true from you. For me, I got, given the years of experience that I have, it kind of perks up my ears a little bit when I hear the canned answer, the prepared response that it doesn't relate anything to you, but you think that's what I want to hear about you in order to identify you as a great candidate. I see through it. When I provide follow-up questions, I then start to peel back that layer and understand where you're coming from, and I don't like it. I think if you give me the answer that fits best with you to identify who you are as a person, I'd rather have that as being, whether I like it or not, I'd rather have that honest answer than to, for you to kind of, appease to what you think I want to hear.
Great point. You have to be you.
So we have a question here from Jacqueline. This kind of gets back to your point, Eleni, about, so Jacqueline says, I sometimes have a hard time with the I when discussing prior achievements and discuss in the we. How do you prepare from being a team contributor to your first official leadership management role? So how do you balance that, I guess, in a behavioral interview?
I like your question, Jacqueline, because it tells me you are humble. You want to have your work and the work of your teammates recognized, and I think that should shine through. And if you're struggling with that, I think it's perfectly fine that you share with the interviewers, like, oh, I'm such a team player that I'll have to keep on reminding myself that I need to speak in the I. And just kind of make it a funny joke if you feel you're struggling. It diffuses attention, you feel better about saying it. But this is, I think, where your practice time with others will come handy. we can work things through in our head, but like Juan was saying later, sometimes it may not come across the best way as you intended it to. So I will start practicing and get into the mental set that, interviews are a quick process. So you may have, I don't know, 2-3 interviews, and you really have an hour, 45 minutes to sell yourself. So thinking that motivating factor, if you really want the job, that you really have to break it out. And I think you can say, to move from the team orientation to the we, you can kind of highlight at a very high level 3 or 4 things that the team accomplish. And then from there, depending on how much time, pick out of those 4 categories 2 where you specifically contributed. And you can say the second step was for us to, I don't know, measure the amount of weight that the bridge could withstand. And I really contributed to that, and here's how.
Also, to answering directly to your preparation, right? How do you prepare for moving from an individual contributor to a leader manager? I think the fact that you're being promoted, and congratulations, that's you, Jacqueline, that the fact that you're being bumped up in terms of your responsibilities, you'll kind of have a bigger view of what makes your company, your team successful, right? You're successful because you've hit the right markers and you've made the right achievements in order to get considered for promotion into being a team leader or manager. Now, take that, identify with your leader, your manager, your director, what was it that made you stand out, and then help your team develop that talent so that basically once you make it up to the next level, you help and mentor and you develop the people that report to you into achieving those same benchmarks. Also, I think for me, in terms of how do you prepare, identify what it is about the people that report to you within your team that stands out. So I recognize and make sure that's public and make sure that it's broad. So if I have people that report to me all the time, and when they do a great job, I make sure that not only they know it, but the team knows it, my leadership knows it, to make sure that we keep the cycle going and it becomes infectious. A direct report that reports to you that is praised will definitely work harder for you to make sure that they don't let you down.
Great. So I want to, maybe we'll just have a quick response to this question, because this maybe is starting to veer off topic a little bit, but it is regarding first impressions. So in a career fair setting, this is from Justin Lopez, how crucial is that first 30-second impression when walking up to the recruiter's table? What is the best material to discuss in that little time frame?
Well, first of all, hi to Justin in Alaska. We just met at NILA, so I hope the weather and everything's going great there. I think, in this era where we have our mobile phones, you don't have to rush to your room to investigate something. You should be prepared. I think all the basic things that we have heard as in terms of the handshake, the eye contact are really, really key. People react very positively to someone who smiles and is passionate about what you say. I know the career fair is challenging, so I think I would have planned what I would say to that company. And I recognize, like you said, it's a 30-second commercial. You don't want to monopolize. It's not the time to hold a 10-minute conversation unless the recruiter or the company representative is prompting you to do that. So I think you need to have rehearsed your elevator speech. And I think, just kind of saying who you are, what you're studying, why you're interested in the company, and put in a personal tie. Tell your story. I became really interested in company XYZ because of this, and I would like to, understand, and then ask your question, and make sure that question is not something that anybody can easily find through researching the internet. I would focus on something that is company culture related or an emerging trend or innovation in that organization that's very exciting, and how you can contribute. And give them a breather, have your resume handy there, so that can prompt other questions.
And if you understand the life of a recruiter at the career fair, you'll know that the best time to carry, if you want to carry a long conversation, if that company is your first pick, then be the first person in line to talk to that recruiter. That in that time frame, you have a little bit more time to flex, be a little bit more flexible in your conversation, get a little bit personal, and try to get with them. Towards the middle of the day, as a recruiter, I get hungry. I'm on my feet all day. Lead in with a great question. Hey, you know, have you gotten a chance to eat at so and so? Is this your first time in my area? If they're, you know, let's say the recruiter, I'm from North Carolina. If I go to ASU, which I've done before, you know, hey, have you tried out the burgers over at this place? They're really great. Start up a different conversation, hand over your resume, make eye contact, smile, and then that's something I'll remember you by. Oh, so-and-so told me about this one place I got to check out, and now you're in my brain. So at the same time, it's direct in terms of identifying who you are, not just by your resume or the courses you took, but a little bit more as a person. That you're seeing me as a human, not just a receptacle for a resume.
So maybe one last, thank you for that feedback from both of you. Maybe one last quick question from Sandra before we transition to the technical and case study interviews. So Sandra Chavez says, at the end of the interview, is a good practice to ask for feedback to ensure we are on the same page as the interviewer.
I think different companies have different policies. Sometimes companies are not able to discuss the feedback because of compliance or HR policies. Maybe a more general approach may be helpful, you know, and just say, I would just more focus on the positives, right? So candidates who typically apply for this position, what would you say are some of the key success factors that you see in the interviews? And are there any general recommendations where you see candidates typically struggling that it will be helpful for me to learn, as opposed to, I think people, I mean, you can ask a question, and if they can get more personal about you, they will. And if not, you giving them kind of like an out that they can share some general trends of why people are not successful in their interviews.
And for me, and I'll take myself out of the role as an interviewer and as a candidate. A technique that I find very successful, and it works very well, is at the end of the interview, I'll say something to the effect of, you know, well, I hope I've answered your questions, you know, to your liking. And I feel that I'm the best candidate for this role, and you know, based on my qualifications and what you're looking for in a candidate. And this is the question: is there anything that's left on the table in terms of you know, considering me as a candidate for this role, or to the point of basically asking in your own way, you can ask this question as to: is there anything that that you feel we may not have talked about that is necessary or required, or is a skill set that's required to be a great candidate for this job? And that kind of human nature is to I guess the interviewer will be more kind and say, oh no, I feel that this, and they'll go and supplement that with you right then and there. No, I feel that this skill set is great. You're a nice person, and we've had a great conversation. And if they do have an issue, then they can actually serve as a follow-up question. Well, I'm looking at your resume, but I'm kind of concerned about this. Can you elaborate? And that leads them to then identify where there were gaps in your interview process that you can then recover from and answer.
And I've seen that question be very effective. So I love that you gave that advice, Juan, because I've seen interviews that were going so be turned around because the candidate opened up that opportunity to further explain other aspects of their credentials. So it's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So we're going to transition now away from behavioral interviews and into technical interviews. And Juan, I'm going to have you lead us with this particular discussion. So can you tell us maybe a little bit about how to best prepare for a technical interview, and perhaps some best practices, maybe in candidates that have shined in their technical interviews? What were some approaches that they took, or what exactly are you looking for as an employer?
Now, the resume doesn't really tell you a little bit more about the person and who they are, so that we've covered the behavioral side of the things, of what you should do during an interview. The technical side is a little bit different. So I, as an interviewer over the last decade and plus, I definitely look at the resume first. And the reason why I do that is because it helps me identify the coursework that you've taken, your work experience, and how that matches up with what has built you is to become the great candidate that you are interviewing me. The fact that you're being interviewed is a definite plus, which means you've gone through the whole computerized resume tracking system for applicants, right? And it takes you basically based off of keywords you put into your resume to identify you as a candidate. Congratulations, you made it past that first barrier. Now, when you come to me with a technical, for a technical position, and I'm going to give you, and I'm conducting a technical interview, be aware that whatever is on your resume is fair game. So if you talk about coursework and say that, and talk about your projects in Python or projects in IT networking with various operating systems, or understanding familiarity with protocol, or certifications in, like, say, VMware, Microsoft, Cisco systems, right? Based off of what you put on your resume, you just created my question set for the technical interview. Whatever you say that you're a subject matter expert on, or that you have expertise in, and that's a key word, when you put in some section on your resume called expertise, and you put in VPN, for example, well, guess what? I was in the VPN team specifically for about 4 years. So I'm gonna ask you VPN questions. And if you can't answer those questions to my liking, versus, Diffie-Hellman protocol, IPsec versus GRE tunneling, and you can't answer other than that you studied in expertise, that's a red flag for me. So the resume for, or at least the technical interview off of what's in the job description and what's in your resume, you need to have down packed so that you can create the questions that I will ask as the interviewer. So talk to me about projects. Put a lot of project work in there, where you can not only state the project goal, your contribution to the goal, and then the result of that project, whether you got first place, whether the project was successful, it got kicked up to the faculty for further analysis. Anything related to your achievements is a plus, but don't bog yourself down by listing every, I took CSC 101, CSC 102, CSC 105. Like, that doesn't matter to me. I don't understand how that works. Tell me about what you do and what stands out from you besides, especially when you're comparing yourself to another candidate in the same, what stands out to not only match what I need for the job description, or based on the job description, but also what else do you bring to the table to let me know that you're a perfect candidate.
And maybe, Juan, you can speak to what are common mistakes that students make during the technical interview. So I'm sure probably one important aspect, maybe if it's not just speaking to the technical skills in your resume, perhaps you're prompted with a technical question of some sort. Maybe walk us through, what do you look for in that student in terms of thought process, level of detail?
So for me, it usually starts off at a very high level. I'll ask you, what do you know about, IP addresses, let's say, for example, right? That's something most people know about. They have home routers or something like that. And then from there, based off of what's your resume, what your skill set, and what position I'm hiring for, I'll then go layer by layer down to where I believe, you can't answer the question effectively anymore. I think one of the most common mistakes, other than putting in expertise that you don't have expertise in, for real, is not knowing when to say that you don't know something. And that's kind of a little bit between, making up the answer, or just going along and then crashing and then insisting to continue further in the questions and just saying, hey, I don't know that, but that doesn't mean that I can't learn that in the future, or that my coursework or my development won't lead me towards becoming an expert in this subject later on. That's kind of one of the biggest technical interview mistakes I've seen. And then from there, identifying, where your limits are. There are certain people that want to do network security when they come into the company for certain roles, but they can't tell me what security, where they want to specialize within security, whether it's AAA, VPN, firewall, IDS, intrusion detection system, intrusion detection, cloud security, web proxy, email security. So there, I mean, just to generalize, that tells me that you haven't really researched what, the various nuances in the roles and how they're so much different from each other. That's kind of one of the things as well that kind of sends a red flag my way to let me know that you really haven't researched where you want to be in your career.
Wonderful. So I think we'll transition actually to case study interviews in our last 20 minutes. And I think a lot of what we'll discuss in the case study interviews also does apply to the technical interviews as well. So I'll have Elenia take the lead on this particular type of interview or interview topic. So Elenia, maybe you can speak to the case study interviews, our best practices, and we already kind of discussed this a little earlier, but why case study interviews are becoming more and more prevalent and important.
I will start with Hi.
Go ahead, Elenia. Go ahead, Sarah.
Sure. I'll take a step back in explaining what a case interview is, because I am aware that in many universities, for example, there's not a lot of support for these type of interviews. So basically, a case interview is a type of job interview that allows an applicant to showcase their critical thinking skills when asked to solve a specific problem. There's a little bit of role play going on in here. You, the person being interviewed, are sort of the SME, trying to solve this business dilemma or business case. And then the interviewer is sort of like an expert on the other side. If we go into a consulting example, since I work in a consulting organization, the interviewee will be playing the consultant, and the interviewer will be playing the client expert on a certain topic, or an executive. So basically, in a case, you are presented information about a business challenge or a case, and then you are to explore the different causes of this issue and come up with a solution or a remedy. This can happen in a time frame of 45 minutes to 60 minutes. Different companies have different variations. And to address Peter's comment about why this is important, why we're hearing more and more and more. I think some of the other methodologies are becoming a little bit rehearsed, and most organizations, particularly the ones focusing on teamwork, problem solving, and analytical skills, really want to see how potential employees can quickly on their feet and put structure into a problem. No one is really seeking for you to solve the case correctly or perfection. Most cases are not solved correctly. It's just showing your thinking. How do you connect the dots? How do you sequence things? And traditionally, it's been consulting organizations who do cases. But if those of you interviewing today with technology firms or startups should be seeing either, if not a full-blown case, you might be seeing case elements within the interview. So a very popular type of question that a lot of the tech startups and technology companies tend to do are kind of the shortened kind of market sizing questions, like how many outlets of a fast food joint are in the southeast of the United States, right? And then you have to come up with a solution to that. So again, either full-blown cases, which tend to be about a page and a half long, or case elements I really think it's the emerging interview methodology. And I think the more I'm talking to people, more companies are adopting this as well.
Great. And are there tips for preparation, Elenia, that you would recommend? I know sometimes consulting firms do mock interviews. there's sometimes people reference certain literature or books, like case in point is a very, staple book reference that people use for case study prep. But what would you recommend, someone going into this type of interview, what's the best way to prepare?
Absolutely. This is not a case where case interviews are not that's something you can learn overnight. You're going to have to practice, just as we've been speaking. I think just practicing your interviews is a very key success factor with interviews. First of all, I would become acquainted with the methodology of case interviews. There are 18 frameworks. Before you panic, just hold that pin back for a sec. There are 18 different frameworks in which you can solve the case. Unless you want to be a book author about cases, no one really needs to know 18 cases, 18 frameworks. So pick 4. And like Peter mentioned, the book Case in Point is a staple and does a really good overview, I think from page 79 to the next 100 pages, going through the different models. Here's 4 frameworks. The most common framework that is the foundation of everything you guys use in your engineering courses is the issue tree, right? You have a main question with a main issue, sub-issues, sub-issues, and you keep on trickling down that tree. That's very organic, and I think all of us who have strong analytical skills are familiar with that. But the other 4 frameworks that I think will get you covered is the 3 C's. Customers, competition, company, profitability, obviously revenue, right, minus cost, 5 forces, which is competition, entrants, substitutes, buyers, and suppliers, and the P's of marketing. Sometimes people call it the 4 P's, sometimes 5 P's. The P's are product, price, promotion, placement, and the variant that sometimes is the 5th one is people. That should get you through most cases. So when you go through the case, you will have time to sort of read the case. It varies, right? You could have, depending how long it is. If it's a 1 or 2 pager, you should have approximately 5 to 6 minutes. You should be taking copious notes. Note taking is really critical, and having organized notes to carry all those facts. Then, so let's take as an example a 45-minute case, so you know what to expect. And I'll tell you this, and then I'll break it down to you. People tend to be terrified about cases. Once you start practicing, you start developing that comfort zone. If you leave this overnight because you have your first case tomorrow, then it will be terrifying. But most people who have been practicing, especially with others, obviously they're nervous. And then 45 minutes after I come out from the case, they're like elated, like, oh my God, that was so cool. I mean, if you are a person who enjoys challenges and mastering challenges, you would enjoy the cases. So going back to the 45-minute case, to paint you a picture, you probably will be spending, 2 to 3 minutes with the interviewer. Hi, hello, how are you? They will give you some instructions, establish rapport, etc. Then you move into reading the materials of what the business case is. What is the problem you're trying to solve? So you will have, ranging anywhere between 5 to 7 minutes. Then you go through the period where you're evaluating and understanding the details of the case to kind of test your hypotheses and get more information to come up with a recommendation. That is an aspect of the case that you, the student, drives. It's not driven by the interviewer, because again, you're playing sort of the consultant. And you can have, it's a conversation. You can have pauses and where you're looking at your notes or doing calculations about maybe the revenue, the potential for a certain drug to be expanding in a certain market, and then you can go back to asking questions. It should be a dialogue, and at the end, the interviewer most likely will pull you to offer your solution. And again, nobody really expects you to have the perfect right answer. Most of us probably think that it most likely will be not correct, but it's just how you justify your thought process and the sequence of how you came from point A to B to C. And you telling that story with confidence, with poise. Confidence is a very important factor, and then you will have the closing interview. So I hope that gave you guys a little bit of a picture. But again, it's just, I love seeing the reactions of people that could be like super nervous, and then after they go through it and they end up enjoying it.
Those are all great points, Elenia. And I personally, when I was looking at consulting firms a few years ago, just found that practicing, a ton of cases, 30, 40, 50 cases, you get better each time, and trying to find individuals that are really good at case studies. We had a consulting club through my university where you could partner up with individuals and do, 5, 10 cases in a particular setting. And I found that to be tremendously helpful.
Yeah, and I wanted to add a point that I forgot to explain about the importance and the helpfulness of cases. The foundation of the cases is issue-based solutioning, which is a strategy and methodology initiated by consulting firms, but used all around the world in all sorts of corporations to challenge individuals to solve real-life problems. So, and the way that it's used in the corporate world, where people are not even realizing they're using these methodologies, is that it goes into executive meetings, business cases that sometimes you will have to bill as a professional, right, to get funding or approval for a project. And obviously, as we're talking today with interviews. So there's multiple applications for cases.
Great point. And I'm going to pull Juan back in here. It looks like Juan got kicked out for 1 second.
I'm back.
So we have about 9 minutes left, and I want to encourage the Facebook Live audience, if there are any questions or burning questions you have, now is the time to ask before we wrap up. So I think we've covered a lot of ground this evening, actually, between the behavioral, the technical, and the case study interviews. Maybe across just all of these different types of interviews, what would be kind of a tip that you would like to highlight, a best practice you'd like to highlight that you could use across all of these different type of interviews? One thing we didn't discuss was even telephone interview screening, which can sometimes be very difficult for certain candidates. So maybe just, what's a best practice that you see that really helps, whether you're an entry level or professional candidate shine?
I would say have a game planned, and particularly in terms of time management. All organizations will tell you how long the interview is, whether it's 30 minutes in person or over the phone, 45, 60 minutes. And you need to have a game plan on how you think you're going to manage your time. You should have become extremely familiar with the job description. And I would recommend doing a mapping process. Take that job description, because probably you looked at it when you applied, and then you didn't look at it, and you see kind of like the deer with headlights kind of effect during the interview, that they ask you something about the job description that you don't recall. So take the job description, and for each of the requisites or responsibilities for the job, map it out to things you have done. And make sure you're telling a strong story about yourself. We don't want to hire robots, or if there's or people that are kind of like Juan said, I don't know if you use the word automatic pilot or kind of just, going with the flow. We want to see your personality, right? And show that, and have a story to tell about you. Why are you there? Why are you interested in that organization? Tell the story. Maybe this is a new industry or a new interest, and some reason made you so passionate to pursue the opportunity. Tell that story. And most importantly, do your homework about the organization. I think one of the most off-putting things is interviewing someone who doesn't understand that company's business. I don't care if it's an investment banking firm, consulting, if it's a technology company, going into an interview that you yourself can articulate what the company does, what you're going to be doing in that role, the challenges, the opportunities, right? Because obviously, no organization is perfect, no role is perfect. So there will be some challenges, there will be some opportunities, and you being able to tie that and connect the dots of your personal story with that information. Juan, I'll pass it on to you. I'm sure you have other great tips.
Yeah, and it goes out to research, right? First thing I do is leverage your network. your network is chef. So if you're applying to a company, must be somebody that you can talk to, give you the inside details about the position, what they're really looking for, what why that position is open. Is a team growing, and then your opportunities for advancement, things that concern you. Leverage this network that we're on right now in order to identify key stakeholders and in order to get the leg up in the interview so that you can ask questions. I think not only should you know what the company you're applying for does or what they're doing, figure out, especially for me, the next step above that would be to read their annual report, right, when they have to file with the SEC. Find out what their goals are. Find out what the CEO says is important for them, what goals they're looking for, and how they intend to reach those goals. Show that and mention that, hey, I read your annual report. I had a little bit of a great area for me. Can you please explain and clarify this further? That's a big plus. People love this, especially interviewers, know that not only did you take the time to look at what we do as a company, but what we're trying to do to make ourselves more successful and why we're looking for this position and why you're sitting there in front of them. Not only that, if you have your LinkedIn network is pretty strong, go in and leverage your LinkedIn network to identify and get back-end information. Go to Glassdoor, right? I mean, these are different sites that kind of give you various perspectives about the company that you're interviewing for, so that you can then identify best questions to show your interest, not only to show that you're the best candidate for that company, but you're the best overall employee because you know it's more than just what you do day in and day out in order to contribute to that company's bottom line.
Great. Thank you for the feedback on that particular best practices overall. I'll try to squeeze in this last question from Justin Lopez. It's an interesting question. He says, a particular company has a video webcam interview. It's a non-interactive interview to screen applicants. What are a best practice to conquer this particular type of interview?
I say
this is an interesting question.
Yeah, and I'm hearing more about these. We don't do these, but I am certainly fascinated in terms of the feedback that I'm hearing about that. I say keep your game on. You stay focused and ignore whatever technical thing is going on that is a distraction. I think in that type of environment, it's more important than ever for you to actually use good listening skills, because obviously somebody's going to watch this video later. So I think for that interview, it is more important than ever, because there's no follow-up questions, that you really answer the gist of the question and show your personality. Don't be intimidated that is all technical and it might feel very, very cold. I think it's more of a reason to make it show your personality, so you stand out from the crowd of videos that I'm sure they're watching after one another.
Yeah, and for me, it's show up early. So not only do you show up early for the interview if it was in person, show up early to the software to make sure it works. I had taken before this session actually opened up, I realized that my Chrome wasn't working in my MacBook, so I had to take 15 minutes while everyone else was preparing to join this session, to get in, reinstall my software, make sure it worked, check the link, go ahead and register, log into Facebook, and in order to get there just in time. So, but that paid off. Arriving early paid off for me. If I would have just arrived at the actual hour of our session, I wouldn't have been able to make a contribution to anything that we discussed today.
Juan, that is golden advice, because typically in those type of interviews, people do tend to have technical issues. Yeah. So I could not agree more.
Great. So I think I shared the sentiment here from Emily. Thank you for your thoughtful and clearly expressed answers, as well as helpful tips and advice. So I want to thank Carrie, Juan, and Elenia for joining us this evening. We greatly appreciate your time. It's always great getting a recruiter's perspective. And I want to thank our Facebook Live audience, our SHEP members out there, for joining. I do want to remind everyone this is part of a career readiness series that we have leading up to the national conference. So there will be three more follow-on webinars regarding the art of negotiation, first 90 days on the job, as well as a professional development plan. So there's a lot more to come. And please take our post survey that I'll be posting in the comments on our SHEP National Facebook. We really want to receive feedback on to keep improving these sessions and providing valuable content. So again, it looks like Juan, I'm going to pull Juan in for just a last virtual wave goodbye. Thanks, Juan, for joining. Thanks, Elenia. And thanks to all our viewers out there. Everyone have a great evening. Take care. Bye-bye.